And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 634. Continuing our team by team fantasy baseball previews for the 2024 fantasy baseball season. Almost wrapping up the AL West. Got a couple more to go here. We're going to Houston, a perennial powerhouse of the AL West and the Houston Astros. Another strong season from them in 2023. In order to help me break them down for fantasy and much, much more, a friend of the show helped me preview them last year. He has a website, ArmChairRoto.com. You can find him on Twitter at ArmChairRoto. Mr. Russell, how are we doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Bubba. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Yep, it's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Love chatting with you. Before we get into the player by player discussion for the Astros, what were your thoughts on 2023? How they finished up for the Astros? Were you? I know they didn't win the whole shebang, but how was it for you?
You know, I'd be lying if I told you that it's not the most fun it's ever been in my life to be an Astros fan right now. I mean, it's a golden age. Uh, I wish other people could experience what it's like to have your team in the ALCS every single year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wish they'd taken home the trophy a few more times than two, but there's still time for that, and I think the team next year is going to be even better. So we're ready to watch them go at it again.
Yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with. That's for sure. It's and they're built properly. I know we talked about it last year, and just the one thing that always sticks out to me that you have to give the brass in the front office some credit for is all the trades that were discussed years ago and all this, that, and the other. They always said Kyle Tucker's not touchable. You have anybody else. Teoscar went. There's many others, and for obvious reasons, it's panning out very nicely because he's becoming a centerpiece to as certain players get older. Tucker's kind of just moving his way up the ladder in the limelight of like, yeah, this will be my team pretty soon. So this is a pretty good transition in that regard. But let's talk about some of these bats here, and let's start with the man that I think we all can agree one of the handful of players that has 50 home run power. It's just a matter of can Yordan Alvarez stay on the field? That is the $1 million question with Yordan Alvarez. And we'll be using the ADP from like the last 15 or 16 DCs, give or take. It just fluctuates a lot these days. But over the last, like, say, 15 drafts, Yordan Alvarez has an ADP still of 18. He's got as high as 15, as low as 21. So, what are your thoughts on Yordan? Because I pretty much said we know the ceiling's amazing, but there's been a lot of floor as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot you could say about him that people don't already know. He's a four category beast. His power metrics just jump off the page. He's one of the best pure hitters in the game. Um, you, you know, that ADP of 18, what makes that kind of unique when you look at other power bats that are in that area is that you're baking in a trip to the IL. I mean, people are taking him around there because he's only being projected for 500 plate appearances or so. And if he finally hits that healthy season and gets 600, 650, there's a ton of room for profit on that draft pick. So if you look at some of the power bats that are going right near him, like Matt Olson or Austin Riley, with those guys, you're already paying for the 650 plate appearances. There's not a whole lot of room for profit there. You're drafting what you expect. So with someone like Yordan, you pay for those 500 plate appearances, and if you get that extra 100, man, you've struck gold, and you've got a top 10 player, because if he played the full season, he's an easy first rounder. So when you look at how he ended last season, I mean, he ended the season healthy. He had 100, I can't remember the exact numbers, but 115, 120 plate appearances in both August and September. So, that's a pace for your 650 plus PAs. And, that's on the table for next season if that season hits.
Yeah, we're looking at his numbers, as you mentioned, the just plate appearances month by month. It was 115 in August, 116 or 118 in September. So that's definitely what you want to see. Those are both the most. He had 114 in May. Other than that, it was June and July were gloom when it came
Yeah.
to Yordan. But it's true, like, because you look at those 2 months, August, September, he had 306 and 293, not bad. Had 12 total home runs. Like, these are big boy numbers when all things are said and done. And the one thing that when I think of Yordan, and obviously steals will never be there with Yordan Alvarez, like you said, 4 category beast. What he reminds me a lot of, and again, minus the steals part, is like Aaron Judge. Like we said it forever. If Aaron Judge could just stay healthy, he could have a monster season. We saw it. He finally stayed healthy one year. MVP, obviously the steals were there for him as well. But who's to say Yordan can't make that kind of a jump where it's like, hey, I'm going to hit 295 to 305 and hit you 48 home runs and driving 130, and like there's a world where that's very, very feasible, and that turns into a potential top 5 pick, like you're saying, which is pretty wild to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, the risk reward. Just for fun, quick. You don't have to go deep into this at all, but it was a question on Bubba the Bloom on Thursday night that was a very interesting question. We did our shortstop preview, and a listener asked, "What's the difference?" Because we're talking 4 category players between a Corey Seager and a Yordan Alvarez, because they both spend time on the IL. It's a decent comparison. Yordan's got the more power. I think the ceiling's there, but Seager just means that consistency time and time again. So I just, out of curiosity, just your thoughts on that. Don't have to go deep into it, but it was a very interesting question the more we thought about it.
Well, I would just say 2 things that immediately come to mind. I do think Yordan is a better pure hitter than Corey Seager is. Corey Seager is obviously really good. But the other thing that comes to mind is Seager has already done what we just talked about.
Yeah.
He finally put together those healthy seasons and gave everybody that big profit.
True. Good point. Yeah. When me and Ryan both first saw the question, we're like, oh, this is silly. Like, it's Yordan. Like, what are we doing? But at least there was credence to it the more you thought about it. Made it slightly more interesting than most would expect.
Yeah.
Kyle Tucker. Love this kid. I've loved him forever. Like, big fan of Kyle Tucker. Kind of talked about him early on. Right now, his ADP is around 7. I know I've taken him as high as 4. That draft is not completed yet because the men is 5 right now. So that'll change when that draft completes. I love Kyle Tucker. I've always loved him. And I'm just going to say he went 30-30 last year because I think you know the joke behind that. But 29-30, not bad. It's basically 3 straight seasons of 30 home runs. The steals are there. Average could be better, but not. 284 is pretty good last year. I'll say that. This dude's just a 5-category monster. Like, I love everything about Kyle Tucker, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's even more we could get from a guy like Kyle Tucker as Dusty's out of town. There's a place in the order that might benefit Kyle Tucker now. So what's your thoughts on Tucker this season?
Yeah, the Dusty factor. I'll talk about that a little bit. Yeah, his ADP is currently 6th. I'm taking him over Mookie. So I've got him at least 5th, and I think you could make the case to take him even a little bit higher. I mean, he's already incredible, but he's still improving. I mean, he's improved his walk rate, strikeout rate, contact rate, and he's done all that while all of his power and StatCast metrics have held steady. So there's a little bit more room for growth in that regard. But you mentioned the Dusty factor. There's this perception that Dusty kind of jerked him around last year. I think that's a bit of a holdover.
Last year wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
Last year was not as bad. It's true.
So he hit 5th 56 times. He hit cleanup 43 times, and he hit 3rd 56 times. So it was split pretty evenly across those 3 throughout the season. But the funny thing is, if you look at his WRC plus from the different positions, he had a 131 WRC plus from the 5-hole. It got better at cleanup, 143. And then in the 3-hole, it was 150. So, I don't know how much to really make of that, but it is there. And with new management next season, you could see him getting a little more respect. It's kind of a weird thing with their lineup because Tucker and Yordan are the only lefties. So the manager has to take that into account. But you could see them working the lineup in a way where he hits 3rd or 4th all season and banks an extra 50 to 75 plate appearances that way. So there's room for growth there too. So yeah, I mean, there's really nothing to dislike about Kyle Tucker.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you said early on that, you're taking him over bets. I did as well. Like, to me, and it's weird because I always have this thing where I don't land on bets, and he's a great fantasy player. It's like if I have the 7th pick or 6th pick, okay, there's Mookie Betts, cool. But if I have the option, like, to me, it's the bigger conversation is it Tucker or Corbin Carroll for people? That's where the 4-5 kind of goes for me, at least. And so I'm going Tucker still, obviously. Yeah. But it's basically Tucker, Carroll, Betts. That's your 4, 5, 6 that you get to play from, unless you throw Tatis into the mix too, which is a valid argument as well. Like it's a fun world we live in right now in fantasy, where it wasn't too long ago, Russell, where it was like top 3 and then it was a kind of a whatever we could do. Now there's a good like 7 or 8 where you're just like, okay, let's like J-Ram used to be in that top 3. Now he's like 11 or 12. Like it's pretty wild thinking back to what we used to have. The talent pool, pretty nice. Yeah. Jose Altuve, talk about the talent pool. He was in that talent pool before, and he's still there. I'm going to be 34 years old. This guy just keeps doing it, and currently has an ADP of around 43 in drafts, right behind C.J. Abrams, which is an interesting kind of place to be. With 17 homers, 14 steals in 90 games. Obviously had the injury that derailed him after a monster 2022, but if you do quote-unquote pace-wise, still a pretty good season. So what's your thoughts on Altuve? As Father Time eventually wins, but right now it doesn't look like it's stopping him at all.
Yeah, I mean, age 34, he really shows no signs of slowing down at all. As far as being a hitter goes, his last 2 seasons per WRC plus are 2 of the 3 best of his career. So he had a 160 in 2017, but last year it was 154. The year before that it was 164. So I mean, his skills across the board they're so rock solid that it just makes you wonder if he's aging at all. And it's so steady that when that age decline does come, you could feel pretty confident that it's going to be a gradual decline rather than a cliff. So you're not going to get stuck holding the bag on a bad set of skills that just completely failed you. The one thing you could kind of quibble with is he's not all that fast, but he's such a good base runner that it doesn't really matter. Stealing bases is a big part of his game, and he loves to do it, and he's extremely efficient. He only has 3 caught stealings in the last 2 seasons, despite not having a great sprint speed. So I would expect that actually to continue. If you look at Steamer projections, so Steamer is projecting a little bit of a pullback on his stolen base rate. So he had Steamer's projecting 16 steals in 682 plate appearances. But I see that as a floor because he stole 14 in 410 last season. So anywhere in that range of outcomes is what you're looking for. So I don't expect that to fall off. And ADP 42 is kind of right around where I have him ranked. That's a perfectly good price. You could plug him in and not have to worry. He's a great building block.
100%. You're going to get usually pretty darn solid batting average, like back-to-back 300 seasons, which is pretty good. I guess the only if there's any nitpicking I have to do, and it's 100% nitpicking, like I still love Jose Altuve as draft cost, is if anything's going to deteriorate, I think it's going to be the power more than anything, but it's due to age. But hey, if he puts 15 to 20 homers with his 20-plus steals and then everything else, he can score 120 runs in that lineup if he plays every day. And that's the stat like we always joke about, no one really pays as much attention to. That's why Betts is so elite when things come down to it. Altuve could be that dude. So that's definitely a building block piece.
Yeah, and he doesn't really rely on big raw power. He's a really good hitter that knows how to put the ball where he wants it to go. And so even though he's not the biggest, most powerful guy, he could still hit the ball out.
Yep, 100%. Especially in the Crawford boxes, and he knows, like you said, he knows he doesn't need to with the guys behind him. Like just get on base, we'll make magic happen. Yeah. One of those guys behind him, and Altuve probably won't be on base that often for him because of the boys in front of Yainer Diaz, but yeah, well, you know where we're going with this. You were on him. We did the previous shows. I love Yainer. The second he started to get regular playing time, I was picking him up everywhere. DC's already had him. Thank you. That was thanks to you. Yainer Diaz, ADP of 111 right now. He's on pace to he's one of the early catchers, like top 5 catcher off the board right now at 23 homers in 104 games last year, hitting 282. And they've already announced he is the everyday catcher this season. So what's your thoughts on Diaz this year? Is he worth going into maybe a higher tier of catcher ADP wise?
Yeah. I wish I had gone back and listened to what I said about him on your show last year, but Yeah, if you drafted him in a draft champions league, you did pretty well, I think. Yeah, his ADP currently is 107. He's the fifth catcher off the board, and I like that pick a lot. I don't always practice what I preach, but I like drafting catchers early. I like just taking care of that and not having to worry about it. I mean, maybe he doesn't walk as much as you would like, but really he checks all the other boxes. He's got a great strikeout rate under 20%, ISO, PS, hard hit, barrel, his EVs, they're all above average. He's just a really good hitter. And now that he's the guy, he should get the plate appearances. And there's really not a whole lot not to like. Steamer's projecting 420 PAs. I'm giving him 475, and that's just based on what he was doing when he took over as a regular last season. So I'm not so much projecting a playing time bump as I am projecting a bump in consistency in the playing time you expect, if that makes any sense.
That makes a ton of sense, and I'm very much interested in seeing where he goes this year. I guess, again, I always like to just, if there's anything to nitpick on, we talk about certain catchers like William Contreras and others getting all those ABs at DH. That will not happen very often in Houston with Yordan and company around. But Yordan will play the outfield a bit. We saw that while he's healthy. But I think we all agree, just let Yordan DH. Just let him DH. Call it good. So that's, I guess, the only backside to Yainer. But yeah, I love him. Love everything about him. So I'm with you, though. I like these early catchers. It's just such a deep position this year. It's hard for me to draft him there. Not against him if he's worth that ADP. It's just I don't see myself there as often because, like, the next guy we're going to talk about, Alex Bregman, his ADP is 108. He's going right near him at a third base position where I'd much more inclined to take Bregman here and take a catcher later scenario. And Bregman's he's been awesome. Like, you look at him, it's boring, but it's the consistent goodness you need on a team. He's hitting 260-ish, 25 home runs last year, but you look at runs, RBIs combined, he's getting close to 200 every single season, which is just quietly getting the job done. And I love what the Astros have done now is because he had that monster home run season when everyone had a monster home run season. Now it's kind of like we know who he is. So they moved him up in the order because he's a great OBP dude. Get on base, let the guys bring you in. So I'm much more on Bregman than I ever have been. Like, not saying I'm grabbing him everywhere, but he's much more on my radar than years past. So what's your thoughts on Alex Bregman?
Yeah, I've grabbed him in a couple of places too. It feels like his ADP is much more palatable this season than it has been in the past. It's like part of me feels like people still look at that 2019 season and they're just disappointed in what he actually is now. But he's one of the best hitters in the game. He walks more than he strikes out. He's got such a good eye. He's got such good bat control. And I mean, he's like a metronome. You look at his last two seasons, it's like almost 200 combined runs and RBI, 25 home runs, solid batting average. He's just one of those guys you can plug in and you can rely on him to rack up stats. It's kind of disappointing as an Astros fan this season because it's his walk year. And, I don't know if you are a person who believes in contract years. I'm not really sure that I am or not, but you have to think he stays motivated to go out there and stay on the field and put up the best season he can. So I don't think it's crazy that we see, an improvement from the baseline that the last two seasons he set for himself.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and I'm not saying everyone has great contract years, but if you're going to see them, they're obviously in the contract years. We see it quite a bit. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one. That I wouldn't be shocked. And Bregman is a chip on my shoulder type guy, so it wouldn't surprise me either if he had extra motivation, like you said, it could go a long ways with Bregman.
Yeah, I mean, like not to stick on this for too long, but the Astros have seen franchise players walk, Springer and Bregman has been such a heart and soul of the team. You could just see him just really wanting to make one last run at this thing and just have this incredible season while they try to win one more trophy with this core together before they kind of move on to the next generation.
Yeah, I'm with you because that was one thing I was going to say is it feels not as much like the Cubs, but kind of where they're going to get to a point where they can't bring all these guys back. It's just the reality of the situation. And so it's like, like you said, Springer left, Bregman might be the next, because that's just the line of demarcation. Because like they're going to want to pay Tucker, they're going to want to do a few things like that. So you can't keep them all. It's the blessing and the curse. You had so much good talent, you just can't keep them all. So enjoy it while you can. And Bregman might be that next casualty, which see how it goes. Now it gets a little more interesting. I'm really, really looking forward to this because, Alvarez, Tucker, Altuve, Diaz, Bregman, we all know they're studs. They're all going no later than like 111. Like, these are all really, really good ball players. Now we get fun. Chas McCormick, ADP of around 171 right now in 115 games last year, 22 and 19 while hitting 273. Super productive. Looks to have a pretty strong handle on a regular playing time again this season. Maybe I'm wrong, though. This is where I'm curious what your thoughts are on Chas McCormick, because early in draft season, I was pretty aggressive on getting a potential 2020 guy. I still am into him, but not like forcing the pick anymore. So what's your thoughts on McCormick?
Yeah, I really like Chas McCormick. I mean, if people pull up his Fangraphs page, I think this would surprise a lot of people, but over his 3 seasons in the majors, 1,200 plate appearances, he's a 120 WRC plus career major league hitter. I mean, he's a really good hitter. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really stand out in any one metric, but he's kind of average or above average across the board in such a way that he can really make those tools work for him. He knows how to barrel the ball up. He's got a really nice barrel rate. He knows how to steal bases, and he's an above average defensive player too. And I know I pick on Dusty Baker a lot on social media. I don't want to keep doing that here, but now that he's gone, Chas should get everyday run, and he deserves it. So when you look at, I think a lot of people are looking at the projections and they see, Steamer at 495 plate appearances and depth charts at 532. I'm giving Chas a full 600. I think the job is his, and he's going to be in there pretty much regular all season. So I think you're looking at a repeat of last season or better, and he is absolutely a great draft pick at 174. Probably a round or two higher is appropriate.
So we're on the same page on that one. So maybe I should get back to being aggressive on him, because that's what I was seeing when I was looking into his page more and stuff. I'm like, okay, this guy's actually really good. Just never really got the full run of it because of platoons and whatnot. And like early reports,
he doesn't even have platoon splits really.
But that's what they were doing with him, was what the problem was. Yeah, as I'm saying, Dusty Baker again. So it was one of those things like now that the word's coming out, they say Yainer's going to be the everyday dude, McCormick's the everyday dude. Like those type of reports come out, I'm like, okay, now this is where it gets fun, because if you started, like you said, projecting the full at bat that you should be getting, this guy can produce in a pretty big way that next year's ADP could be really interesting to talk about. Now a player in Jeremy Pena. There were kind of, some had high expectations, some were like, temper those pretty quickly, please, because he's not as good as we saw. It was kind of a mixed bag. We got an ADP of 224 right now. He hit 263 last year, which is an improvement. His walk rate and K rate improved, but only 10 homers and 13 steals. So what are we thinking with Jeremy Pena, as it was a rough sophomore season?
Yeah, he's such an odd and frustrating player to evaluate because that 2022 and last season are so different. 22 home runs in 550 PAs in 22, and then 10 last season and almost 100 more. Steamer seems to believe 2022 more than 2023. And I think there's some room for optimism there, for something in the middle. Like you said, he increased his walk rate from 3.9% to 6.8%. So he had a much better on-base percentage last season. I lowered his strikeout rate from 24 to 20, improved his contact rate. And he's real young, so I could see that growth being real and even continuing. The problem is he started hitting a bunch of ground balls. I mean, 46% isn't great, but That's what he did in 2022, but he jumped up to 54% last season. He just turned into an absolute worm killer. And that cut his barrels in half, even though his power metrics kind of stayed the same. If you look at his minor league career, that ground ball rate's a bit of an outlier. So I think it's reasonable to think he gets that ground ball rate back down into the mid to upper 40s, hit some more balls in the air. So I think that might be what the projection systems are looking at, kind of regressing back to his career launch angle and ground ball. So I think my expectation is somewhere in the middle of last season in 2022. So I think you're going to get a pretty reliable batting average, some home runs in the mid-teens, stolen bases, kind of the same as what you got last season. And, hitting at I don't think Joe Espada is going to bat him second and put the kind of pressure on him that Dusty put on him. I think he's going to be, down in the bottom of the order unless he really turns it on and turns into something we haven't seen yet. And, he could just be a shortstop who plays really excellent defense, who knows he's just going to be batting seventh or eighth, and he could do the best he can to improve his hitting game. And so the pressure's kind of off there. And as someone who is going to be in a great lineup every day, those counting stats are going to be there. And he's just a really solid building block, and he leaves room for something more. There's some room for profit. So I think he's just a really good piece, and he's not too expensive. He's a good middle infield roster filler.
Yeah, it's good to hear because, I was all in on him. Well, not all in, I was very invested in him and Willie Adames last year. So we saw how that went between those two. Both had basically recession seasons. And it was tough to see because you mentioned some of the things with Pena, where you could see rooms for improvement or kind of reverting back to what we saw 2 years ago. And I'm hoping we get that. Now you get it at a discount. So if you want to take that chance, and it's what I keep saying on certain shows is where he's going now. If you're in you're at a 12-team OC, if it doesn't work out, he's an easy drop. He's an easy drop. But if he goes back to closer to what he was in 2022, that's a heck of a middle infielder. That might be your shortstop if something were to happen. So those are the kind of players I like to target. Obviously, I know I'm not alone in that, but with that kind of upside, and again, super young. He could be 26 this year or something. So
I think he's younger than that, isn't he?
I could be wrong. I got him. He's 26. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but still, that's young, very, very young. Yeah. So we got some options there. Much younger than this next guy, Jose Abreu, who's 36. And I'm going to be 100% honest. I thought it was a one-year deal last year, and then I was going through stuff, and I was doing research, and I saw. I won't give the AAV on this one, but it was a 3-year deal, and I was like, oh, so Abreu's there for a couple more years. Gotcha. I was just expecting it to be 1 year because it's Jose Abreu. But 18 homers, 237 average, ADP of 287. So he's basically a back-end corner infielder if you need him. I have not even come close to clicking on Jose Abreu's name in a draft, but what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of I don't want to be too mean. When you sign that 3-year contract, I thought this is like the 6-year Andrew Benintendi contract in Chicago. It's never going to end. Abreu's line last year kind of looks like what you would expect from an aging semi-slugger, age 36. I mean, the downside is, worst season of his career per WRC plus. And it's the first time in 10 years that he's been a below average hitter. So his skills are clearly in decline. You can't really question that anymore. The upswing it looks like a pretty gradual decline. I mean, his strikeout rate, contact rate, hard hit, barrel, his EVs, they're all fine to good. He's also an Iron Man. He doesn't sit out many games. He doesn't really get hurt all that often. He had 594 PAs last year. He's been below 600 only twice in his whole career. If you prorate out 2020, it's over 600. So he still has some some value you can squeeze out of him as a CI compiler who's going to be hitting in a really good lineup. So his ADP the last month is 286. I got to be honest, I haven't taken him either. There's just a lot of pretty decent corner infield options, but I don't think it's a bad pick. I think if you take him there, you plug him into your CI, he's probably a perfectly reliable guy who's not going to disappoint you too bad.
He feels more like a 15-team play than a 12-team play to me.
Oh yeah,
it's like I just want to clarify that for because it's like 15-team. I can see it because it's boring, but it's a floor with the potential maybe a little more that it's what you want in a 15. Where 12, it's more like I'm going to be shooting for some upside here or doing something else. So yeah, and that's what the like. And I'm glad you said it with the Brady. Like he's still consistent. He plays a ton. Like this is what we do want in a 15-team league. This is the ideal kind of boring veteran. But it's an interesting play. I'm curious to see how he does this year. But he fits the team actually pretty well, surprisingly. Yeah. He had that one was a month stretch where he just destroyed baseballs, and all of a sudden we thought he was back for a minute.
Yeah, and the Astros seem like they're the only team in baseball that doesn't have 3 first basemen. Like
it's true.
He's
true.
The guy. He's playing.
That's true. So that's good. Any other bats you would like to mention here? Because they do have a couple maybe platoon situations, but if anybody of interest for you?
Yeah, I just want to mention Jake Meyers real quick. The Steamer and our friend Mike Curlin, they both have Meyers penciled in as the everyday center fielder, which makes sense. He plays really good defense. He's just not a very good hitter. So I just have some thoughts on that. If he sticks as the everyday center fielder, he's going to out-earn his current projections. So Steamer has him at 354 to plate appearances, depth charts at 399. And if he's actually the everyday center fielder, he's going to bat ninth, but he's going to get 500 plus. Mm-hmm. So at an ADP of 606,
that's pretty good.
He's worth taking 150 picks before that, if you believe he's going to be the everyday guy.
True.
And whether he is or not, I think that's a pretty good gamble in draft champions leagues. The thing is, I'm kind of thinking the Astros might sign someone to platoon with him. Like, the left field at Minute Maid Park is not a very big space. You can kind of plug anybody in over there. So defense isn't really that big a deal. And the Astros could use another left-handed bat in the lineup. So you could get someone to strong side platoon with Meyers. So, like an Eddie Rosario or a Jock Peterson type. That's think
a good comp. Yeah,
I think both of those wouldn't be either of those wouldn't be very expensive and would make a good platoon partner for him. So you'd have a deal where, when Meyers is in against lefties, he's playing center field, and when he's not, McCormick slides over to center. He can play a passable center field, and then the platoon partner plays left. I think that's a pretty likely scenario. So, if that happens, Meyers is pretty worthless. But just keep all that in mind. If he is the everyday center fielder, he's a pretty good DC pick. But wait for that other shoe to drop.
I like that a lot and I like 2 reasons. If he is the everyday guy, it's an amazing price tag on an ADP in a DC. That's ridiculous. But I could definitely see the Rosario situation. I think he'd be perfect for that team, like a amazing fit clubhouse-wise, on the field-wise, like everything. That's a very intriguing situation there. Let's head to the bump. Let's talk starting pitching first for the Houston Astros, and we'll start with Framber Valdez, just the man that – he's a machine, an absolute machine is the best way I can say it. Just pumps innings and gets the jobs done. He had obviously a little bit of a hiccup at a point last season, but still 198 innings after 201 in 2022. Ratios are still good, like 3.45 ERA. You can live with that. Strikeouts weren't bad. The dude's awesome. ADP is around 58. What's your thoughts on Framber Valdez?
Yeah, he's great. Obviously, last season was a bit of a step back from 2022, which I think is probably a best case scenario for him. That's a ceiling that is still there, but I certainly wouldn't expect him to repeat that. I think 2023, despite the hiccups, looks more like his true talent level. Some of the changes from 2022 to last season, his like super insane elite 66% ground ball rate dropped to 54%, which is still elite. Part of that is he was throwing his sinker a little bit less, and that's part of a gradual decline that's been happening since 2020. And while the sinker's great for ground balls, it's actually the worst of his four main pitches based on XBA and whiff rate. So he threw the sinker and he threw his curveball a little bit less and increased his usage of his changeup and his cutter. And he stopped throwing his fastball completely. It just looks like a more balanced and sustainable approach moving forward, not relying on one pitch so heavily and spreading it out, because all of his pitches are pretty good. So I kind of see that being his approach moving forward. And people mention the concern about his first half and his second half last season. I don't know how much of that I'm really concerned about. I mean, basically, the first half looks like the continued elite production from 2022, and then the second half looks more like his true talent level. But the thing is, he had a really horrible July, and that's pumping up his whole all the numbers on his second half were really a handful of kind of sustained blow-ups in July. But he was still pretty good in August and September. He kind of bounced back. His velocity on the year was actually better than it's ever been. It was up to 95. It had never been above 94 before, just where he sits. So that's good. So basically your range of outcomes is that elite 2022 and the very good 2023. So 200 innings of something in that range, that's what you want. So I see his ADP at 58 as a pretty good bargain.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm back. At first, this is where I've said it way too many times. There's a lot of biases in this fantasy game we play, and it's just the reality of the situation. And so when the degenerate in me doing the very, very early stupid drafts, I'm sitting there going, man, maybe he's an accumulator like Sandy, who I was always not a fan of this, that, and the other. But a lot of what you said, the more I do drafts, the more we do research. Now, that was back in late October, early November. It's not January. It's almost freaking February. As we're talking, we're closer to February now. Just doing all that work, you start to see a lot of the stuff you're talking about where I take my step back. Why did I love him so much going into 2023? What was it? He didn't change that much, really. It was pretty much the same dude, like you said. And that's where it's okay, put the – there's a rough patch in the second half. Put that away. Look at the dude. Look at the total picture. It's like I always say with hitters is if you're playing roto, you want the whole season. So what do you care if he slumped in May? Who cares? You're playing roto. Head-to-head guys, you guys got your own story. That's fine. But we play roto pretty much. And in the end, Framber was still a monster that you were just chucking out there every week. So
yeah, sorry you lost your playoffs. That's why fantasy football is stupid.
That's why I hate head-to-head. I've had this debate with some really good friends of mine, some great friends of mine that do great content. Bogman and the Welsh, love you, brothers. We go head-to-head on that all the time. Roto versus head-to-head leagues, and it's entertaining. Justin Verlander. There aren't many guys on my preview shows, Russell, so far that are older than me. Let's put it that way. He's going to be 41 years old this season. He's got me by a year. And his ADP right now is 132. And I've seen him just fall in certain drafts. Obviously, he's got a min pick of 108, so people are taking him. But, 162 innings, that's good. That was actually kind of a surprise, all things considered. Ratios were fine, but the strikeout drop just concerns the snot out of me, Russell. What are your thoughts on Verlander? Is he still worth the 132? Or is it you're kind of worried that this is kind of a thing of the – if he feels like he's going the Kershaw route minus the strikeouts right now?
Yeah, I mean – I'm not taking him at 132, but I'm not going to dump on him either.
Yeah.
He wants to pitch into his 40s like Nolan Ryan did. And Nolan Ryan had some pretty effective. I mean, not everyone's Nolan Ryan, obviously, but if anybody comes close, it's Verlander.
It's true too.
obviously there's some skills erosion happening there. Walk rate, strikeout rate, swing and strike rate, contact. I mean, you can look across the board and you could see the skills kind of eroding. They're hitting the ball. Batters are hitting the ball off him harder than ever. But he's still really good. He's such a skilled pitcher that even with skills erosion, he can still find a way to really make it work. And the only question is, how many innings is he going to get? Do you believe that he's going to hit 40 and break all of a sudden? I'm not sure. I think that. If he pitches another 165, 175 innings, which I think is pretty reasonable, he's probably worth the cost of where he's going. I'm kind of hedging and giving him 150 in my sheet.
That's right.
So people are taking him before I am, but I don't begrudge that pick at all. I just kind of view him as kind of not a hot potato, but kind of a warm potato.
Yeah.
And I'd just rather eat something else for dinner.
Yeah. When it comes to Verlander, it's just like there's more avenues to, I think, failure at the pick than success right now compared to years past. So, like you're saying, it's not poo-pooing on his season coming up. Like, he can still be very certain. He just feels more like he's better real life player than fantasy now. I think he's taken that shift. And again, could be totally wrong. Like, if he does throw 175 somehow, you're probably getting great return at pick ADP 132. But I'm more in your shoes where I'm thinking, he could still be very good, but it was like a lot of 5 and 6 inning starts. Like 6 innings wasn't even in the cards a lot of nights. And that's where it's, you get a lot of those 5 and 6 inning guys later in the draft to me. And that's where it's tough for me to take Verlander. But the ratios are still great. So if you're looking for a ratio, dude, he's basically Kyle Hendricks X when Kyle Hendricks was doing his thing with more upside. So if you want to kind of, at least that's where my mindset is right now. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting with Verlander. Christian Javier, the enigma that is Christian Javier. Amazing postseason before last year, 2022, that just skyrocketed his ADP. Then it was a bumpy road this year, but actually finished kind of entertaining yet again to kind of reel people back into things. Through 162 innings, 4.56 ERA, 180 ADP now, so you're not paying anywhere close to what you paid last year. So what are our thoughts on Javier?
Yeah, I think he's more of the hot potato than Verlander is. I got to be honest, I'm pretty worried about Christian Javier. Everybody knows this. He lost a tick on his fastball between 2022 and last season. It dropped from 93.8 to 92.7, and everything kind of fell apart. So, he throws his four-seamer like 60% of the time. He's like a one-pitch guy. And if that pitch isn't working, it's really hard for him to sort of tinker and find other things that work for him. I mean, if you look at his pitch mix chart on Baseball Savant, and it has been exactly the same for 4 straight seasons. 60% on the four-seam, like it's 4 straight lines across. He doesn't tinker. So in his transition from a reliever to a starter, his mix has stayed exactly the same. And if his 60% reliance pitch isn't working for him, there's just, he doesn't have the ability that other pitchers have to lean more heavily on something else. So I just don't want to invest too heavily in that kind of profile. So at ADP 179, there's just a lot of pitchers going there that I really like. So far in Draft Champions, I've just been out. I've passed him over. I'm just not all that interested. I will be watching him in spring training while I'm drafting Fab Leagues in March. So if I see that his velocity's back up, that would make me interested. Or if I see, he's got some new pitch he's working with and he's throwing it a lot and it's looking effective, and all of a sudden he's changed his pitch mix for the first time in 5 years and he's got something else he's relying on, that would make me really interested too. But if I don't see those things, I'm probably just ignoring him.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's kind of, I've had some very smart people break down Javier, and Kyle Bland broke down the PLV stuff of where his pitches were low, all kinds of things. And you like the fastball, when he lost that tick, and it's basically an average fastball now. And if you're missing, like you said, it's batting practice almost for these professional hitters, and we saw that at times last year. So that's concerning. And it's a great buy. I have 0 DC shares, not even in. But that's the beauty of spring training. We look at velocity increases, we look at pitch mix changes, and in a fab league, again, you can take the gamble late if you want, drop them, those kind of scenarios. A lot different than a DC where you're just like sitting there staring at them on your bench every lineup change, and it's just it's painful to see. So with you on that one. Let's go to Hunter Brown here. Hunter Brown had his big coming out party, 155 innings pitched in 2023. The numbers I don't think do justice. ADP of 184. You got that 5 ERA. To me, it felt like he just got tired. That was me. But as an Astros guy that watched him a lot, what are your thoughts on Hunter Brown? Because for overall, all things considered, I think it was a good first campaign. Maybe not fantasy-wise.
Yeah, I mean, results-wise, it was pretty ugly. But, he's being drafted right around the same spot as Javier. And I'll take Hunter Brown over Javier 10 times out of 10 this season at least. This might be the least useful analysis I give because Hunter Brown he's such an enigma to me. There are a lot of things about him that I like. I am an absolute sucker for a 50-plus ground ball rate. I mean, when I look at a pitcher's profile and I see that, I'm like, okay, well, that's a building block that I like to see. What else does he have to work with? And Hunter Brown's got a pretty deep arsenal. There's nothing that he relies upon too much. He's got, several above average pitches, and you can just see that there are several different avenues in which he could kind of figure things out and make it work. And I'm pretty confident that an off season of looking at what went wrong would allow him to explore that, and the Astros help him. So I just see a lot of ways that he could turn things around and have a productive season next year. I don't look at his profile and go, oh man, I don't know how he's going to do this. It's just like the total opposite of Javier.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's kind of where I am. I don't think I have shares of either, honestly, all things considered, but I'd be much more in on Brown than Javier. That's the gift and curse of it all. Jose Urquidy, projected to be the 5th starter in the Astros rotation right now. ADP of almost 500, it's 495. Obviously injury-riddled 2023, still got 63 innings out there. Wasn't elite by any means. But what's our thoughts on Urquidy? Is he just a streamable dude, or is he worth a gamble in a DC at that price?
Yeah, I think both. I'm not sure he'll be the 5th starter. I think Urquidy and JP France will both get starts and pitch out of the pen. I think they'll both get a shot. Urquidy's ADP is 490. I think that's a pretty useful pick because he's going to get innings. He is showing some skills erosion. He's got a 3-year decline in his strikeout rate and a 3-year increase in his walk rate. But he's been a pretty reliable pitcher for 300 innings over 4 seasons. It wouldn't be crazy to see him recapture a little bit of that magic. He's on a really good team, so he can snag some junk wins. And I mean, that's really what you're looking for at a pick around ADP 500, a guy who's going to log heavy innings on a good team. So I think he's a pretty useful pick around that spot. But yeah, I think that's what he is. I think he's a streamer starter, long reliever, 100 innings, maybe 120 innings. I kind of prefer JP France to him. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say he's going about 30 picks higher. So I had shares of France last year, and there was good and bad behind that. But why would you prefer France over Urquidy? I'm curious.
Yeah, France had a nice little run there. I mean, he's not really anything special. He kind of overperformed, and his role isn't totally secure. But you could kind of, there are a couple of ways you can squint and kind of see him making things work and sticking long term. I mean, his four-seam fastball isn't all that great. He's, it's 93, but he doesn't really get whiffs on it, and batters hit it really hard. If he threw that a little less often and leaned more heavily on some of his other pitches, he could find a mix that works a little bit better. His cutter gets twice the whiffs as his four-seam. His changeup was pretty good. It's a top 15 changeup in baseball. He mostly used it against left-handed batters, but it was really effective in limited usage against righties. So if he leaned on that a little bit heavier too. Same thing with his curveball. He only threw his curveball 13.7% of the time, but it gets a ton of whiffs regardless of the handedness of the batter. So he's got these other weapons in his arsenal that he could kind of tinker with and lean on a little bit heavier. And, he's, I'm not predicting anything, but you could kind of tilt your head and look at it and see a way that he can be a little bit better than what he did last season. Whereas with Urquidy, you kind of feel like you know who he is already.
Yeah.
So I expect them both to sort of have the same role, but I can see a narrow path to France returning a little more value than Urquidy.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you there, and it's you always have that part in the DC where you're starting to debate: do I try to get these 5.5 to 6 SPs type guys that aren't fully into the 5 spot? Do I want to go with these late reliever guys? And France is always kind of that one of those dudes sitting there when you're looking at him, and I'm much more interested in him than Urquidy for sure. You put down here Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers, both coming, going to start the season on the IL most likely, especially Garcia, who had TJ, and McCullers with the shoulder injury, both essentially free in drafts right now. I've seen not even get drafted in some drafts, put it that way. Like Luis Garcia has only been drafted in 7 of the last 16 drafts. So what's your thoughts on these two going into the season? Because it's tough for me to trust either one.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention them for draft champions purposes. They're both expected back kind of mid-season, which means, September. I'm not drafting Luis Garcia in DCs, but I've grabbed Lance in a couple of places. I just kind of view these guys as lottery tickets. A lot of people in the 40 to 50 rounds of draft champions, they'll take prospects, and I do that too. But out of some of these prospects, what you're really hoping for is an August or September call up and 30 innings, and hopefully they're good innings, useful innings. And that's kind of the same thing you would get out of a Lance McCullers or a Luis Garcia if they returned and pitched a month or a month and a half for you, and they are both proven arms in the major leagues. I think the expectation would be that they would be pretty reliable if they come back healthy and do pitch. So I've grabbed Lance. I mean, I think I've done 8 draft champions. I've grabbed Lance in 1 or 2 of them just because I'm an Astros homer and I like Lance McCullers. But I think it's as good a pick as some of the prospects people are taking at pick 700.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That's a great way to break it down too. Why are we all in on taking these late prospects? We're not inclined to the other situation. So that's a very valid situation. And comparing the two, if McCullers is healthy and cleared, they're just going to let him roll pretty much. Where a prospect, you're like, they still might kind of have kid gloves on type scenario. So that's another way to potentially look at it. Yeah. Now let's head to the bullpen, where things got spicy on Thursday. Things got much more interesting with the Astros bullpen. Like Ryan Presley's been that guy that he's gotten the job. He always has an assistant or 2 on the IL. So Brian Abreu or whoever's there comes up and does his thing. And then Presley comes back. And in the end, solid fantasy closer, all things considered. Right now, Presley's ADP is around 83, 84. But there's this shadow starting to come over that situation. So how are we looking at this Astros bullpen now from a, fantasy perspective? Because real life, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch if a hater shows up.
Yeah, I mean, what a nice surprise that was to hear that rumor yesterday. So there's a rumor yesterday that the Astros are pursuing Josh Hader pretty aggressively. as an Astros fan, that would be pretty awesome. So I'm crossing my fingers for that, even though I immediately went and checked my Ryan Presley shares on my DC teams that I've drafted. I have him on two DCs, including a 400. So
yeah, I didn't want to check because I know I have a few, and I'm just like, oh no.
I'd hate to punt saves in a $400 DC, but it'd be bittersweet because I'm an Astros fan, and I would love to see Hader closing games in Houston. Obviously there's not much analysis to provide. If Hader gets signed, he'd be the man. But Presley is, people kind of know what to expect with Presley. He's aging. He's in skills decline, but he's still a very, very good, effective reliever. And when he's in there, you could be confident that he's going to pitch well. He's going to get good ratios. He's going to strike out more than a batter an inning. He's one of the last. I can't remember what his ADP is. I think it's in the 70s or the 80s. But he's kind of one of the last reliable closers, barring a Hader signing, that I'm comfortable taking as my RP1. Yep. This year in Draft Champions, I've been really trying to be disciplined about not taking closers in the top 5 rounds. In the past, I've been a round 3, round 4 guy, yep. But Presley's one of those guys in round 6, 7, 8 that I felt really comfortable. So if they don't sign Hader, he's a great pick. And yep. If they do sign Hader, this is Presley's final year of his contract. Maybe they ride to the World Series with him and Bregman, or maybe they trade him and free up cap space or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Presley would be a desired commodity for certain teams. There's no doubt in that. So yeah. I'm curious. I was very surprised when I got out of I had an evening meeting I was a part of. I got out and saw that buzz coming around. I was like, that was not what I expected to see, but all right, let's go. Makes things quite interesting in that regard. And that obviously kind of puts a poo-poo also on Abreu and other situations out there until we see what this Hader deal is.
I don't think it's crazy to think that they might trade Presley if they signed Hader.
Oh, I'm with you. They should.
He's making $15 million, and there are a lot of teams that would give up something pretty good to have him pitch in the 9th for them for a season.
100%.
He has a vesting option for 2025, so only 24 is guaranteed.
That's why I think this is the maybe dumb reaction to me, but it's also kind of like the buyer's action is if this Hader thing happens, Presley price drops. I'm more interested in taking that dip and seeing, because I think there's a point, even if it's not to start the year, I think he gets traded at some point, and that's where at least in a DC, you can get those saves at a different time at a discount. So I'm interested there, but we'll see. That all has to unfold still, and we'll see how that plays. Last little bit I got for you here, prospect-wise, like Corey Julks. We didn't even talk about Corey Julks. Is he in play this year, or what are we doing?
Man, again, I wish I had gone back and listened to what I said on your show last year, because
he was on the outline. I basically copied and pasted and I erased. He was one of your top prospects to discuss, and we talked about him.
I feel like we had a long talk about Julks in late January or early February. And then a bunch of other shows started talking about it after that. And he worked out great as far as a late draft champions pick. He stole 15 bases, something like that. He had a nice little run there and absolutely returned his value.
He's 717 right now.
I got to be honest, he's not really been on my radar this season. I kind of feel like he had his shot and he didn't stick, and maybe he gets traded to someone else. I'm just not all that confident that the stars are going to align for similar magic this season.
Yep. Well, that's a shame, because basically free in drafts, but especially if they go and sign the Rosario like we talked about earlier or something, that even puts more of a damper on that situation. Any other prospects we should be looking at, because they keep churning out options here, but I don't know if this is the year for it. I haven't heard a ton of buzz. Maybe you know better than I.
Yeah, not really. It's kind of an unexciting system in terms of who might come up this season. Kennedy Corona is kind of interesting. He played in the AFL. He had pretty good numbers in AA. I mean, I'm not drafting him, but he's kind of an interesting name to put on your radar for the future. A lot of people like Spencer Arrighetti. He's a starting pitcher. He doesn't really pop for me, but he does kind of look like he'd be the next man up. And the Astros seem to have this starting pitcher magic with SP prospects who weren't really on anyone's radar. And they're, unless they sign someone, there's going to be some opportunity in Houston. So Arrighetti is probably going to get some innings in Houston, and maybe he sticks. So remember that name. But other than those guys, not really.
Not a problem because, joked about it out the gate. The first 5 guys we talked about, they're pretty much locked in barring injury. So it's going to limit the prospect upside this season for the Astros. Final thoughts. What are your expectations in 2024 for the Houston Astros?
For Alex Bregman's final ride, maybe Ryan Presley's last ride, World Series.
Yeah, it's hard not to. The only if I give any pushback, it's Mariners are improved, and the Rangers obviously did what they did last year, so that's big. But this Astros team is built for long-term success, as we've seen, and it all relies on that top end of that pitching staff because Framber's great. Can Verlander, Javier, Brown do their thing? If those guys take that, like Verlander just stays Verlander, but Javier and or Brown takes that next step, this team's filthy. Because they're going to score 1 million runs. It's just a matter of that pitching staff getting the job done. So,
yeah, I think the addition by subtraction of Dusty leaving and Diaz getting full run, McCormick getting full run. I mean, that alone, I think, makes the lineup better.
Yep, 100%.
And so we'll see how things go.
Well, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Before we head out of here, remind everybody where they can find you and what you got going on.
You can find me on Twitter X at ArmChairRoto, and my website is ArmChairRoto.com. I don't write that often, but I've put out a handful of articles since the season ended, some auto news stuff. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, check out Russell's site. There's some sharp stuff on there. Very, very good minds. It's always fun having him on the show and chatting. So I appreciate it, my friend. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Bubba.
Everybody, this was Bench with Bubba, episode 634, your 2024 Houston Astros team preview. Catch y'all next time.